So as we segue to our next speaker, giving you an opportunity to navigate your way around the program and the upcoming speakers, allow me to introduce Stephani Kimou, who is the founder and principal consultant of PopWorks Africa, a doula to Black parents and an educator who has taught international relations at Georgetown University and decolonizing international development to over 200 practitioners globally. Now, she's an Ivorian American who loves Abidjan and is currently based in Baltimore, Maryland. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker for today, and you can also share your thoughts and feedback in the chat as well as through the polling system. Allow me to warmly introduce Stephani Kimou.
Hello, everyone. I'm Stephani Kimou. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the principal consultant at PopWorks Africa. So I am really excited to join you guys today, and I'm really happy that you're at least interested in hearing more about what I mean when I say decolonizing international development is anti-racism work, and it is work that centers solidarity, meaning we're working with communities and not for them. And so it is completely doable, especially with the resources that we have at our disposal right now. And so today I want to take you through kind of 3 windows of opportunities to begin interrogating if your institution or yourself as a practitioner can decolonize development from where you sit, especially for those of us who are working in service of African women and African children across the continent. And so first I want to kind of bring to our attention the idea of what does it even mean to decolonize international development? Well, I think, number one, it means understanding colonial histories and trauma of the countries that you're working in. Because oftentimes the space held by white-led development institutions will perpetuate that history and that trauma. I think decolonizing international development means dismantling racist and problematic development norms, like using generic and harmful poverty porn, oftentimes images of African women, to raise money, not for the people in those photos, but for the institutions and their operating costs. And so it's really important to know that decolonizing international development is about identifying and dismantling racist and problematic norms that have left a lot of African women marginalized. I think that decolonizing international development also means honoring locally rooted expertise. And that's not because we want to use the experiences of people, especially African women, for digital campaigns and communication strategies, but because we are reading the work of African people. We're inspired by the art of African people, and we're citing the research of African people. And so finally, I think decolonizing international development means making space for holistic and genuine local indigenous ownership and leadership as the standard and not the exception. And so I believe to decolonize international development is to dismantle these oppressive systems that have negatively impacted women, young people, and honestly, Africa's most marginalized and exploited. And so to do so, I believe the international institutions that are with us today, who a lot of us are claiming to be in service of African people, I think if you do claim that, then you can consider these 3 things. Number one, how are we dismantling the white gaze in the development sector? For me, the white gaze is the idea that everything we do in the international development sector first prioritizes the experiences and desires of white people or white-led power structures. What do white people think and feel? Or how can we get more white power structures to better understand and react to something? I think the white gaze in international development, especially for us working in service of African women and African children, shows up in 3 ways that we have to be really, really aware of. I think monitoring and evaluation is a manifestation of the white gaze. Can we kind of expand our metrics of success outside of what white power structures believe is true and really orient that definition of success and impact and goodness towards what the communities are saying? I think the white gaze manifests with international development fundraising techniques like the harmful poverty porn that I mentioned earlier. And in the same vein, I think the white gaze manifests in the way we tell stories, especially of African women, that can often silence their own narratives and replace that narrative with whatever the white gaze thinks is most pertinent and important at that time. I really think a tactic to decolonize the international development is to ensure that we're not prioritizing the needs and desires of people outside of the communities we say we serve. And for a lot of us who work in this sector, that means not prioritizing what it is that the white gaze would want, but really thinking, what do these communities want from us? How can we resource them? And so I want to now just kind of let us settle into that. There may be some discomfort with the idea that the white gaze in international development is problematic, but when you consider the history of colonization, like I said earlier, we really have to take into account that healing has to happen in international development for us to show up as our best selves, for especially the African women and the African children that we seek to serve. So really think about how the white gaze manifests within your life, within the sector, within your institution. Next, I want to talk about how we can foster more transparent partnerships with the communities we seek to serve and to support. And so I think that means relinquishing control of the money we often dangle over the heads of marginalized communities of women and children. I think it also means ensuring that we do not make the final decisions on behalf of anybody. Instead, that we're seeking ourselves to work in solidarity with communities, meaning not stepping in front of communities to represent them, but really supporting them from the back and ensuring that we're resourcing them exactly how they want to be resourced. So I want to just reiterate that fostering transparent partnerships with communities is a tactic to decolonize international development, because that means we're relinquishing power back to the communities, because that power should have never been held outside of the communities. So really consider, if you are thinking about how to decolonize international development from where you sit, is there space for you to relinquish power that was never owed to you because you may not sit in the communities you seek to serve? Finally, I want to talk about centering local expertise as a tactic to decolonize international development. So this is my favorite thing to remind people in terms of their personal activism as they look to decolonize development. And I think that a reminder to always, always center the work and the research and the movement building, especially of African women, that is much more important than elevating resources and work and movement building of those outside of the communities you seek to serve. And so I think to combat saviorism, meaning a lot of international development folks will want to enter Africa to save it, as it has done in the past or thought it was doing in the past. To combat saviorism, I think we have to really work with community and in community to ensure that their work is being elevated, their words are being elevated, their art is being elevated. And so I think a huge tactic of centering local expertise that all of us can do today is following more African researchers, especially women, following more African writers, especially women, and ensuring that these African people and their work is what is inspiring and informing the international development work that we seek to implement every day. And finally, I think those three considerations, dismantling the white gaze, fostering more transparent partnerships, and centering local expertise will build trust in the communities we say we want to serve. And I think that's an important tactic, is trust building to decolonize international development. Because without trust, a lot of people will work in front of the communities instead of in support of the communities. So as we build trust as an international development community with those people, especially African women and children we seek to serve, I think we will see interventions that are more robust, more locally rooted, and more honestly rooted in love and transformation than international development norms, which is oftentimes saviorist norms. And so I really, really implore all of us to challenge ourselves to think about what is at stake if we don't decolonize international development like we see it today. What will the communities we say we care about lose if we continue to work in the ways we have been, which oftentimes is silencing and marginalizing to the people that we say we love the most? And so I'm really excited to share this with you guys. I hope there were some nuggets of information in this discussion and presentation that will make you think and make you interrogate. How can I further decolonize development from where I sit to really, really, truly stand in solidarity with the communities that I say I care most about? Thank you.
Well, that was our opening keynote for this morning by Stephani, Kimou, and really giving us a lot of meat to reconsider and think about in terms of how it is that we deploy development programs. I do see in the chats that there's a lot of interaction and some comments in terms of your feedback. But before we do jump into the chats, I'm also keen to hear from any of you who might work within the development environment to maybe share some of your views with us and case studies in terms of your experience on the ground, and if you have taken steps in terms of being more cognizant of the impact that you want to have on the livelihoods that you are trying to impact, and just exactly how you've roped them into some of the solutions that you're looking to implement. We'll give you a quick minute or two to type that into the chat. And whilst we review some of your feedback, very briefly, I see here Kanyisa Diamond saying spot on. This manifests in South African boardrooms as well as in the private sector. Melissa Chetty also commenting that nothing for us without us. And a lot of applause and responses as well from David Wilson, Lindsay Sherman as well. Such a great point, totally agree, fostering transparent partnerships. So what is clear is that everybody does agree that there is a sense of making sure that we are not viewing the policies we implement with a particular veil, but really cognizant of the lives that we want to change. So do keep your feedback coming in the chats. But something else I want to draw your attention towards is the poll. That would be right next to the chats system. And I've been monitoring the poll, and it's been interesting to witness how many of your answers have varied. Now, the questions we've asked you, or the question that we asked you, was what can development practitioners do to combat against saviorism? And we offered you at least 6 options in terms of best elevating the voices of those in marginalized communities, working with and in the community, follow the works of African writers, artists, thinkers, especially women, and fostering transparent relationships with communities. I guess all of the above is really where majority of you sit. 52% of results at the moment currently seated within the recommendations that Stephani has offered and looking to implement all of those particularly. So interesting to see your responses. Do keep them coming in. I think B also standing out as in working with and in the community, allowing you then to understand the needs of the community, how best they need to be addressed, and most importantly, as Stephani also recommended, true and genuine ownership and leadership of the people that you're trying to serve. Just a few other comments that I'm also viewing at the moment. One that also raises a concern here by Itumele Ndlamini, saying, sadly, communities don't have the courage or feel empowered to actually push back. And that perhaps is something that we can discuss a little later on in the program, and of course in terms of our deliberations when we consider the solutions that we bring to the table. How liberal is it that we allow our counterparts to feel in terms of taking into account some hesitance that they might feel at the moment? Andile Dube also adds, this applies to both South Africa and international agencies, not just communities, but experts in the field that generate evidence for interventions. Money doesn't mean you know more. Don't abuse the power. Wonderful to see a lot of agreement and conversation that's taking place between many of you within the chat service. And we're keen to hear your ongoing feedback that does come through. Also see Tebogo Sefenyadze saying, fully agree, fostering transparent partnerships. And Belinda Kathrada saying, we found learners suffer from a massive inferiority complex that's due to their race. How do we then overcome this? So as you say, very critical elements that we do need to address in terms of understanding the culture, dynamics of the environment and the people that we and the communities we want to serve, and most importantly, allowing them to break down any particular mental models that they face versus your own and how it is that you interact with them. So coming back to those polling results, as you can see, the large majority, 48%, still in agreement that we need to implement all of the above recommendations that were made by Stephani. And I find this quite encouraging. If anything, particularly for a country like South Africa, where we understand the strains of our history and the emotional distress that it does cause to have conversations of this nature, it's really encouraging to see the conversations that are taking place within the chat service and how best it is that we're looking to counteract and source solutions to these difficult conversations. I do want to strongly encourage you to keep the conversation going, and perhaps in our networking sessions, this is an element that we can bring to the table in raising some of the questions that have been brought to the fore as to how best we can address some of these challenges in terms of demystifying and including the local leadership and ownership of the lives that we are trying to change. Well, thank you for participating with us in our opening keynote. That was with Stephani, Kimou.